Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Call this meeting to order. Board of Police Commission for Halifax Regional Municipality, October 18th, 2023. I'd like to we'll start with the land acknowledgement of the Halifax Regional Municipality is located in Mi'kmaq, the ancestral and traditional lands of the Mi'kmaq people. The municipality acknowledges the peace and friendship treaty signed in this territory and recognizes that we're all treaty people. Begin with item 1.1, which is a hearty and heartfelt welcome of Dennis Daly, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police H Division Commander. It's nice to have you here, and we would like to give you an opportunity to say hello if you would like to. This is your first attendance at our meeting, so welcome. And you can do something from your desk, or if you want to stand up, it's entirely up to you. We're very casual in that way. Can you turn the mic on for him?
So thank you very much for the invitation, and in many respects it feels like old home week because it wasn't a few years ago that I was before the Board of Police Commissioners. So it's a pleasure to come back here. Thank you for the warm welcome, and it is my third time back in the province. So I've actually been here a year already. So time really flies. So really good to see Dawn and Reed here today as well, and so. Really like to acknowledge both of them and looking forward to many years of further collaboration, and really appreciate and thank you for the work that you folks all do. You have a tough job, and providing that necessary governance and checkup on police is a very, very important role that we certainly encourage. So thank you for what you do. And I have been participating a little bit virtually, especially when there was the explanation of the PwC report and whatnot. So again, thank you very much.
Thank you, Commander Daly. Just for anyone who might be listening and is not aware, when we say H Division, people automatically assume H is for Halifax. But in fact, in this situation, H is all of Nova Scotia. Chief Christie, who is also here and he's at the back, he is our chief for Halifax detachment. So that's the difference, and it's a pleasure to have the big guy today. And on that note, Dennis, I'm wondering if you would come forward to the front of the room, because we have something that we'd like to present to you on behalf of the board. This is an acknowledgement of the 150th anniversary of the RCMP, and we were looking forward to you coming, so we held off a little longer. So this is just a certificate that says Halifax Board of Police Commissioners extends congratulations to Halifax District RCMP on the occasion of the 150th anniversary of the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. The role of the RCMP has been integral to public safety in the Halifax Regional Municipality, where an integrated model of RCMP and the Halifax Regional Police is recognized as distinctly unique in Canada. So on behalf of the board and those who are in attendance and not in attendance, thank you for the work that you have contributed to, and all of your members and all of your team here in Halifax.
Super. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much.
You're very welcome, Tony.
Thank you, Chair, and
You're
thank
quite
you to all the
welcome.
board members.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Please do. Yeah, please do. Yeah, welcome to. Thank you. We're moving forward to community announcements. Are there any members? No. Approval of the minutes, there are none. The approval of the order of business and approval of additions and deletions. Madam Clerk, are there any additions or deletions today?
There are no additions or deletions.
Okay, do we have someone who would move that we accept the order of business today? Commissioner Thomas, is there a seconder? Commissioner Blackburn, thank you. All in favor say aye. Those opposed nay. Motion is carried. Is there any business arising out of the minutes? Don't see any. Call for declaration of conflict of interest. Hearing none. Consideration of deferred business, we have none. Correspondence, petitions, and delegations. Is there any correspondence, Madam Clerk?
No correspondence has been received.
Thank you. Petitions, are there any petitions?
No petitions.
Thank you. There are no presentations specifically outside of what's in the agenda. So there are no information items brought forward. These are the kinds of meetings we love, isn't this? That's just like whipping right through. Reports and discussions, of course, at 10.1.1, we have Halifax Regional Police 2024 and 25 Business Plan and Operating Budget Framework. So this is an opportunity for the chief and his team from Halifax Regional Police to give us an overview of what we will be getting more detail on in the coming weeks and months of budget deliberation. So with that, Acting Chief McLean. Yes, please.
Now things will bog down a little bit.
They might.
Perfect. Good evening, Chair and fellow members of the board and HRM staff. And I also want to acknowledge Acting Assistant Commissioner Daly here today, my golf partner down in Bridgewater. And as well, I want to first say before we begin, I just want to thank the commissioners who attended the Fallen Officers Memorial on Sunday, and thank Assistant Commissioner Daly for stepping into the breach to deal with the situation that we had. I think it was a well-run event. It was solemn, but at the same time, it was a nice event. And I can tell you that, personally and from my members and the members of the other organizations, your presence was noted and appreciated. So we're here today to talk about the business plan and operating budget framework, which, that one don't work. Perfect. So this is intended to be a relatively high-level introductory discussion relating to the budget for this upcoming year. As you can see, and you've seen these numbers before, this was the net operating budget for 2023-24 relating to revenue compensation, non-compensation operating expenses. So approximately $100 million related to compensation and benefits, offset by some revenue and recoveries, and $6.5 million related to non-compensating operating expenses. So today, I just want to acknowledge Jerry Blackwood, the Executive Director of Finance, for his work. We've been working closely with their team in relating to developing this operating budget recommendation that takes into consideration the following requirements and trends: the contractual related pressures in the areas of compensation, service providers, facility leases, those sort of things that turn over every year and also add increased numbers to them. The inflationary and rising costs over the past 5 years for existing goods and services related to a bunch of items, uniforms, software renewals, training, out-of-town travel, all these things that are important. What $500,000 in ammunition got you 5 years ago does not get you that today. And so we've had conversations with the budget team in relation to how we address those issues. And then lastly, adjustments to revenue opportunities and cost recoveries resulting from previous year experiences or future expectations. I want to talk just briefly about some of the methodology in today's presentation. One speaks to, we've gone over, and I talk about my team. We've gone over the last number of budget submission requests that came to the board, because I believe that if it was important 3 years ago, perhaps it's still important today if it hasn't been addressed. And so we've looked at some of those issues, and we looked at, do they still remain? Has the environment changed, or have we mitigated some of those issues through different means? And both are real in the sense of certain items. Moving from there, we talk about the alignment of our strategic plan themes, and those were some of the issues that I would have brought forward, I think, my second day on the job when I came here in terms of presenting to the board, and then the priorities from our organization that roll into them. And at the end of the day, and you see it's bolded, is the support needed for the frontline response, which is a priority. I can tell you, certainly you would know, Chair Kent, from attending MER, that is always an ongoing issue in dealing with, our MER, Management Employee Relations, in terms of dealing with the HRPA and the union and our membership. And we'll see that this will be a theme that spreads throughout this presentation. So these were the themes that I presented at that meeting. They're nicely color-coded now for reasons that you'll see soon, but just to go over them quickly: community safety, addressing recruitment and retention challenges, workforce engagement, member wellness, our relationship with the public, proactive response policing and operational readiness, mental health response, and the policing transformation study. And today's primary focus then is to discuss the initiatives and resource requirements that I've proposed, and perhaps some which aren't proposed in terms of from your perspective, and importantly, gain valuable feedback and direction from the board on those forthcoming initiatives and resources to incorporate into the next budget year process. Oh, can I go back? Hey, there we go. So the first issue looks at the patrol division. And as you'll see up top, it has direct impact in the areas of community safety, mental health response, relationship with the public, and operational readiness. And there's a couple ways that I'll look at this. You'll see up in the right-hand corner, it talks about direct augmentation and indirect augmentation. And direct augmentation talks about providing those resources into our patrol environment that directly impact the patrol environment. The 12 constables, and Superintendent Boyd's here, who was very important in this plan, twofold. One is that they provide direct support for the patrol division. I can tell you that since January of 2023, we've been averaging close to 4 to 5 callouts per day to get to our operational number on the shifts. And that's been with a lot of mitigation factors in conversation with HRPA. The second part of that speaks to, and you've had the presentations previously in relation to mental health calls and our wait times at the hospitals. You've had the presentation that talks about we spend approximately up close to 4,500 hours per year in the hospital. There's 8,700 hours in a year, just to put it in perspective. So when we talk about those discussions, we're talking about having constables that are specifically trained to deal with mental health calls, but at the same time, through a collaborative effort with the Capitol Health and the hospital, to be able to reduce our footprint on the patrol level by having one officer potentially guard those on the IPTA of more than one. So it's an innovative program attempted to address our patrol staffing numbers. Because what we do know is, from our free presentations, we submitted approximately 4,300 IPTAs, but of those only 4,300 EDP forms, emotionally disturbed persons forms. Of those, though, only 653 are those that end up at the hospital under the IPTA. And when I say that, that means those are people that an officer has determined through their interactions is suffering from an issue, but at the same time constitutes a danger to themselves or others that ends up taking them to the hospital. And our wait times are significant, which is, it's not just my wait times. Same with the RCMP. It's same. I met with the chief of Bridgewater today. He has the same issues in Bridgewater, just at a smaller scale because of their size. It's a reality. So what we want to do is we want to augment the patrol lines, but at the same time provide a service that allows us, when we do go to the hospital, which is 650, approximately 1.7 times per day, that we have a process in place that we can mitigate against having several officers for long periods of time at the hospital by having specifically trained officers, but at the same time, when they're not at the hospital, can actually be on the road providing valuable service to our frontline support. And that's the important part of this. It provides a twofold benefit in my mind in terms of providing coverage. This does not suggest in any sort of way, because I fully support the concept of alternative response. I fully support the concept through the Community Safety Office in terms of, so when I talk about 653 IPTAs, there's still another roughly 3,500 calls that potentially we may be able to divert. And I fully support that. Now, we don't fully know. There will always be a level of call that require a police response because of the nature of the nature of the call or the uncertainty of the call. So I don't suggest that we're going to get completely out of that business, but I fully support the concept of a viable alternative response for a vast majority of them, recognizing there are still going to be those 500, 600, 700 calls that require police intervention. The second piece of that talks about the Community Response Office. If you're a counselor, you know well the value of the Community Response Office. I was a divisional commander for 4.5 to 5 years, and they were extremely important to my success. They deal with community issues. They deal with a myriad of concerns in the community. But what I'm talking about, 6 constables, 2 per division, East, Central, and West, that are what I call an extended community response officer reach. I went to a community meeting the other day in downtown Dartmouth, and they raved about their community officer. They just said, we wish we had them longer during the day. And to which I said, you're probably right. So I think within the current confines of our collective agreement, I would see extending our footprint for a longer service. So an afternoon to evening shift in terms for community response officer, which I think would be extremely beneficial to our service and the community. And at the same time, and I've spoken with Executive Director Moore and as well as Max Chauvin, establishing more formalized linkages with the Community Safety Office in terms of they have contacts that they can reach out to through our office in terms of, and this is not about policing encampments or policing the homeless. This is about working with the Community Safety Office to provide those necessary and unique interventions sometimes that are required of our most vulnerable populations. So in that sense, that I would consider to be a direct augmentation of our patrol response. As we move to the next area, this is an indirect augmentation, because the other part is that we rob from patrol all the time to do other things that I think are very important. As I'm sure you're well aware, within the last year, we got rid of the polygraph in relation to security testing for new hires. So we've gone to a very, what I would say is a very comprehensive program that social media checks, database checks, interviews, going to people's houses, doing security background clearances, interviews. It's labor intensive. Currently in the security clearance units, we have 1 sergeant and 1 constable. We also have another secondment from patrol who's not providing patrol services because they're in there. And this is at our slow time. This is at our time when we're not running a class through, and we will be running the class through shortly. That's one of. I should have introduced Deputy McCombs. I've talked about him before. He's the elusive Deputy Chief Reed McCombs is back in the fold and sitting there. So yeah, it was short and sweet. Yeah, and so these talk about doing background investigations and those other things, but I also think we have an opportunity to look at civilian investigators, particularly that are trained, particularly that have perhaps police backgrounds, that has a positive fiscal element to bringing those into the fold, because we can do that within our current contractual environment. And at some point, and we're talking about two bodies, at some point when we getting into our in-house class, the demands on that program will be significant. And as we know, hiring people is maybe one of the riskiest things we do, and we need to get it right. And the fact that, and talking to Inspector Legere that runs the program, he suggests, he thinks that his program is as good, if not better, than the polygraph, but at the same time, it's very labor intensive, and we need to provide positions that speak to that and not take from patrol or other frontline response. This is a previous submission that's already been made, that I think is still relevant to the day, is the addition of a constable in the hate crime unit. That also speaks to community safety. It also speaks to a relationship with the public, and also speaks to the police transformation study in terms that, because it's an integrated CID environment that also does the files, which I confirmed in RCMP territory, and I think that's important. As we know, as of today, October 18th, we've surpassed the amount of hate crime and hate incidents we recorded in 2022. We know that's going up. Current geopolitical environment is only going to add to that even more. I think, nationally, this is a serious issue, and I think we need to be sufficiently resourced into it. And in terms of, we'll probably have future discussions, I think, after with Chief Superintendent Christie, as we move forward in some of our transformation talks around CID and staffing in there, because I think that's very important. But I think this is, as a trained subject matter in the issue of hate crimes and hate incidents, I think that's very important for providing a service to our community. HRM is, according to the Greater Halifax Partnership, is if not the fastest, well, no, actually the fastest growing municipality in Canada. We're growing at a rate of approximately 4 to 5% a year. And the reality is we're bringing in a lot of people from diverse backgrounds and all these other issues. And the unfortunate reality to that is that these issues become more prevalent, and we have both a legal and I think a moral obligation to ensure that we're doing these things right. Which moves into the next piece, is around the police science program. I do believe this was also a previous ask. This is also indirect augmentation in the sense that we have to provide bodies to run the police science program, and invariably they come from the front line. We know that over the next 7 to 8 years, we're going to have to run a class almost annually, or 1.2 year in terms of just the number of time it takes to actually to run one. To having dedicated resources in there to run that program is extremely important. Not just from the delivery of the program in terms of having established persons and the expertise and the familiarity, because there's a lot of work to running a 9-month police program. I can guarantee you that. At the same time, we've seen this year in terms of, I think you've probably already seen the numbers around retirements. I think by the end of 2029, we could have over 200 retirements. They all won't take place, but at the same time, we're currently dealing with issues around resignations and all these concerns. Like, the police science program is definitely going ahead. It definitely will be staffed. I just don't want to have to take from the frontline response to staff it. I guess that's the simplest way I can put it. And certainly last but not least, in terms of member wellness, which is extremely important, the Employee and Family Assistance Program has one EFAP coordinator. We've had one EFP coordinator since 2014. Our EFAP referrals have doubled since then, if not more. We actually recognized in the last year we needed someone else. So we did the exact same thing in terms of, we've borrowed from the frontline response in terms of, and this doesn't have to be a sworn police officer, it's a civilian in our organization. We borrowed from our frontline response and IES communicator in terms of be able to administer the EFAP program, which is, I think this board has had previous presentations in relation to some of those issues. It's one of those issues that I don't think we can go back to not having a second EFAP coordinator. The issue is, where are we going to find it from? I think it's probably something that we need to establish within our staff establishments, because I think it's important enough. So in a nutshell, these are, at this time, the proposed service enhancements for 24-25. Patrol Division, 18 constables, which is separated between the mental health response, direct patrol response and CROs, hate crime unit, the police science program, the executive offices for the civilian investigators, and the EFAP coordinator. I think we've already seen this at a previous budget meeting, the capital budget. I put it in here just for your continued knowledge. One thing I do want to say about that is, and I will continue to push in terms of, the facilities piece is a very important piece to our organization. I know we see it up there earmarked for future use, but I think one of the things I'll continue to push, and I'll be meeting with the executive director of facilities and the area that deals with that in terms of, site selection of a place for a new headquarters will be a very tangible and well-received step in this process moving forward. And then body-worn video. I add that because in terms of, I think it's important to get some direction from the board as to where the body-worn video piece is. I understand there was some funding in relation to a coordinator that was allocated a few years ago. I don't believe that position ever got realized. So it's still out there. I know there were concerns around policy development. I can tell you, I've added the police transformation study in there as a piece of this because I've already spoken with Superintendent Christie in terms of, I'm sure you all know that at some point the RCMP will be going to a body-worn video initiative within HRM. Our policy should look pretty much the same as theirs, like really at the end of the day. I mean, there may be issues, there may be differences around hardware or some of the storage capabilities, but I think, the reality of of an officer showing up perhaps somewhere around the line of Dartmouth and Cole Harbor and two officers having body-worn camera video on, at the end of the day, the citizens that's being served should basically should be understanding that video and that is going to be handled in the same way. And that's one of the things I would commit to in terms of working with that. And I think that's that's an important piece, I think, going forward in terms of, but I think, it's important. I think that, that the board gives some direction as to where they see this program going in the future. Next steps in terms of, so there has been a communications plan communicated through the clerk's office that will highlight some of the pertinent dates, and we will amplify those through our own social media accounts because we'll have, there will be public consultation and that going forward. We expect to see that soon. And then at the end, it's feedback from the board. At the end of the day, I guess we will request a motion at some point, but that'll be up to you in terms of providing direction to cost the items identified in this current proposal. And at the same time, provide your input and your advice and your guidance as to what you see as important in the coming year. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. So at this stage, just help me, Madam Clerk, would we have the ability to ask the chief some questions just for clarification? And then if there was some debate that might happen tonight, we would have to have a motion put on the floor? Or can we just have that? Is it all going to be just our clarification and questions? It's looking like we have some form of a motion being looked for, which makes sense. It's around what do we need the chief to do now, knowing this is the basis of the considered ask, assuming we don't add more to it or take anything away from it, and that we need more detail in this. You need to know from us what you were looking for, right? Yeah. John?
So the normal course would be to ask questions of follow-up, and then at a point in that, when you're satisfied that and the motion as recommended is put on the floor, it would be open to amendment. If there were specific areas that you wished HRP and finance to additionally look at the cost of for future inclusion, now is the time that you would bring that forward and ask the chief to look at those items. If there's something in the presentation that the board is adamantly opposed to, then the direction should be provided to say, look, there's no point in costing that out at this point, and that'll allow the chief to go away and start to do a preliminary budget together with finance to bring back. Obviously, then that whole process is in the board's hands.
Yes, and just for clarification, before we go back to the chief, and I open it up to the other commissioners, if there is something that another member who may not be here, or as the budget proceeds, if there is something that is later would want to be added, is there still that opportunity until it's actually ratified and goes to council as a recommendation? There's still that opportunity for this commission to add, delete, detract, whatever, expand on. So just so this motion, to be clear, is the beginning of it, not the end zone. We're not in the end zone, we're only in the beginning of the puck being dropped.
We're at
I
the-
think I got two different,
the
two different
kickoff.
sports going
I
on.
think we're at the kickoff.
The
Madam
kickoff,
Chair.
that's it.
The only
Three
piece,
sports.
right, the only piece I would feedback is that obviously costing out some items may take longer than others. And so, with the goal of reaching or staying within the sort of timelines that the municipality is hopeful of, the sooner that the board can bring forward a request to consider an item, the better, I think, for all. And that's all. But certainly, at any of the meetings in the future, if there's an item the board wishes to give direction to HRP to say, look, stop pursuing that, or to add this in for discussion, recognizing the work that's involved, absolutely. And even right up until the point where you're being asked to finalize the budget, you can then take a different direction. You can make amendment or what have you.
Okay, and further to that, I just want to note that this meeting and several that are coming forward is happening because of the board's request from previous years, and in particular last year, that we wanted more time to have better conversation, better understanding of what is being asked for the board to make a recommendation to regional council. And that is Jerry Blackwood and his team's certainly supportive of that. And this is the also early stages of public feedback that we would get, and which we are scheduling, and we'll mention this at the end of the night, but there are opportunities for the public to still come forward, and we're pushing that into an earlier stage as well than we have in the past. So we're reflecting that community piece as well earlier in the process, so that everyone has an opportunity to speak to the concerns that they have around that. So with that, I will now open the floor to members. Commissioner Blackburn.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and thank you very much, Chief, for this. Just wanted to get a bit more information on a couple of things. The 12 constables that are being requested for direct support. I'm just wondering how you envision sort of their day-to-day looking like. Would these 12 constables, I mean, first of all, would they have mental health training in-house through you guys? Would that training come through Capital Health, or would they come to the job already with expertise in mental health? And just wondering, is the plan to have these constables just sort of out on the road doing, regular patrol duties, but when that call comes that there's somebody in a mental health crisis, they would be the ones dispatched to that call?
Through you, Chair, to the member. So the first part would be, the expectation would that their training would be similar to that, the equivalent to that of those that are in the mobile mental health unit.
Okay.
So
Wow.
CIT training,
Yep.
critical incident trauma training, and whatever else that we can provide that would be helpful to that environment. And yes, you're right in terms of, like I said, we spend a lot of time at the hospital, but we're not there all the time, right? We spend a lot of time, but it's not all the time.
Well, 4,500 hours, that sounds like a lot of time to me.
Yeah, and that's considering sometimes that there's two bodies, so that gets doubled
Yeah.
in terms of that. There's a lot of math to that, moving parts. But what we want to do is, and it establishes a few things. Part of it is an actual, and And at some point, if we have to get in deeper, I'll have Superintendent Boyd speak to it in terms of, part of it is even a structural trade within the hospital that allows us to actually do this.
Right.
Which I say, I think is an innovative, collaborative way of dealing with some of these issues. Then the second piece is around, having those members that are actually able to provide, frontline patrols. So if there is no one at the hospital at a particular time,
Right.
which was, they can actually be out there and they can be like sort of almost modified mobile mental health people that can go to certain calls and certain things to the best of our abilities, recognizing we don't necessarily get to control,
Sure.
things that we get to go to, but I think it's better than what we have. And at the same time, I think it addresses a couple of our issues around, because the other part is, we have challenges with, when we have different indiscriminate officers at the hospital and stuff all the time. It's difficult with some of the other stuff that you need to get done around follow-up work and all this other stuff. So these officers would be more dedicated. We'd have to make steps within the patrol to make sure that they're, that people realize what they're there for, right? And it will certainly be, I think, beneficial to our overall patrol deployment.
Okay. And had a question too about the body-worn video. So if I follow the bouncing ball correctly, we had allocated money for a 12-month position for a pilot project, weren't able to hire that person. So that money is just sort of still sitting there.
I don't believe this.
Through you, Chair, I believe the money was in the wage model at one time, but I believe checking with Craig is no longer in the wage model.
Okay.
So we'd have to get that back into the wage model and get that up and running again.
Gotcha. All right. And a quick question for RCMP, just looking to see when you folks are moving forward with the body-worn video. And are we getting to a point now where the courts are going to start demanding it?
Chair, through you to the counselor. I'll answer that in a two-part series. And first of all, the RCMP nationally provided a tender, had a successful company, and went into a testing phase. And so that testing phase did not create the results that facilitated us to finalize a contract with that company. So now we're retesting and working with a new contractor offer through the proper processes. So that testing, that validation process to make sure the equipment is as capable as it can be for as many different scenarios, including light, darkness, cold, remains underway. The second subset of that is Chief McLean and I have shared the RCMP policy that talks about how the equipment is used. And as per Chief McLean's comments, as the technical parts about how the equipment, how it's stored, what's the battery life, how that gets figured out from the vendors, the policy, hopefully, we're going to be very in close lockstep about when a member leaves the station or police car, when do they turn that on? Is that body-worn camera on from the minute they tie on their sneakers, or is it only on when they deploy? And so from a public transparency perspective, there's important joint work there. And I think it's very positive that at least we have policy that's available, shareable, and we have the time to work through that. Chief?
Yeah, no, I totally agree in terms of, this was one of the, there would be, I'm sure a significant amount of effort that went into the RCMP through the research and policy branch that we would not actually have the capabilities to do it to that extent in terms that we could benefit from.
But you can lean into their experience for sure.
And I think that's important.
Okay. And the court piece, do we know, are there any court jurisdictions in Canada where video is expected, demanded, or?
Chair, through you, and I'll turn to my colleagues in HRP. When we talk about video's been coming into policing for over 20 years. So if you think of motor vehicle traffic stops, it's not uncommon for many police cars and many different places across the country to have a video camera running in car camera video system and that being recorded. It's not uncommon for protests and other events from an adoption of policy to have that recorded. It's not uncommon for video statements of certain levels during investigation for certain victims, high-risk crimes, for that to be recorded. So my perspective would be, Counselor, is that the courts will always have an appetite for the best evidence or the best information that shares the story of what happened as a truth-seeking exercise. And so that will continue to unfold, but I don't believe the court will ever say, and this is speculation, so I
Sure.
want to respect my role and not speak for the justice system. But often many members in police responses, sometimes even if they have the video equipment, it might be too dark to work.
Gotcha.
Or it might be too rainy, wet and windy to pick up, the microphone well. So it's imprecise technology, but it's helpful technology that hopefully in the public interest or transparency of trying to be open about the public and the events that happen, what the officer may have faced in terms of, did somebody have a knife, did they have a weapon? It hopefully will be more clear and more well accepted. But there are different engagements, perspectives across the country on whether or not body-worn cameras are truly a way to create that. So there is a debate about that, but I think many of us feel it's an important positive step forward. And I think the courts will look for that evidence when it's available. Chief?
Thank you very much.
Yeah, to you, Councillor. To say, I echo his comments in terms, I think we need to be clear about expectations in terms of what body-worn video provides. And it is not a panacea for everything that, it does provide maybe the most unbiased narrative of certain events at a certain
Right.
time, which may have evidentiary value.
Just another tool like the
Just
computer in the
another
car.
tool, right? It may have evidentiary value. It may speak to some accountability issues. It may serve as a means of dispelling some myths that sometimes occur in certain events that, but at the same time, we have to be mindful of the fact that, because a lot of people get caught up in, the American experience and all this other, we still have rules around FOIPOP or the federal legislation around release of information and all those other things. Like, so we have to be mindful of that in terms of,
Managing
like-
expectations.
Yeah, exactly. Like,
Yeah.
there won't be an event that happens on Monday that Tuesday, the whole body wouldn't film cameras on the news in terms of, like that's just,
Yeah.
when the virus, so we just have to make sure. And I think managing expectations is exactly what I'm getting at.
Beautiful. Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Any further questions? Commissioner Akindoshu?
To you, Chair, and thank you very, very much. I remember vividly that I was one of the people that asked for this process to involve the board in this process. When I mean this process, I mean budgetary process, budget assumption, so that we could make critical or make a fulfilling debate or sense of what the budget will be. That way we can say we are part of that. I do not think the information we have in front of us gives me the confidence to say that I can proceed and advise, because today you may be wanting us to provide directions to the cost items identified in this operation and capital budget. I do not have enough information to provide that kind of direction, and I'll tell you why. For me, a budget assumption will give me where we are, where we want to be, and I'll use an example. Human capital will be what percentage of your 2024-25 budget? I would assume that it will be a reasonable percentage of that. What are the requirements? Who do we have? How many do we have? How many are active? How many are inactive? Do they need a replacement? And how many do we need for growth or expansion? The other part that I would want to give an example is gap analysis in certain areas. Talked about equipment, operations. That's basically on operations. What are the budget heads and where are we moving from and where are we moving to and why? I know this talks a lot more about strategy, but it does not give me clear assumptions of the budget. And I'll make some critical points in the capital budget. Take, for example, you talked about the capital budget highlights what we call digital communication. If you look at this proposed projection, I will call it capital projection, it's zero allocation for digital communication. And yet we talk strictly about police science program. How does digital communication impact your operations or strategic operations? Going forward, looking at these days of AI and other high-tech crimes. Another thing that we raised here was the issue of a new HQ building. Of course, in this capital budget, it tells me zero. There's no plan for that. And at the last meeting, we talked about that. I thought there was going to be at least an ask to HRM. Let's put it there. But it shows that there's a plan in 2026, 27 of 1.5 million. How did we arrive at that? And at the end of 2030 or 2032, we're looking at 90 million. What's 90 million? What's the impact of inflation or even deflation on that figure? It just doesn't give me the parameter of figure. Budget is about facts and figures. And I don't see this in all this. So as we go on, and I really want to support your force, honestly. I really want to be able to put a word. It might not fall through, but really defend with facts that if there's an increase year over year of 10% in operational budget, this is the why, supported by history and the actual propensity to grow HR, grow this, grow that. You've stated the facts, but it's going to be very difficult. I'm just being factual that it's hard for me to wrap myself around that. So where are we going with this? I'm an accountant. I work in the private sector, and figures are so important to me. And the assumption behind those figures are what makes those figures real. Again, my support is to make sure that this budget provides what the police need to operate effectively. I'll rest my case.
Thank you. Jerry?
Thank you, Madam Clerk, and through you, Madam Chair. Yeah, just all valid points made by the commissioner. So again, we want to try to bring this back a little bit. So what is before you tonight is basically a framework, right? This is I'm not speaking for the chief, but we spent a fair bit of time together. But the chief has come in and said, based on my operation, this is the pressure that we're having right now. This is a need. This is what he's putting in front of the board for consideration. No real decision needs to be made on this tonight, as the chair has said, right? We do have other meetings for budget, right? So one of the things that we heard was to build in more time for public participation and more time for budget deliberation, right? So we do have other dates that we have built in that as a commissioner, if you want more information, certainly that's in your purview. You can put it to a motion and we can come back here, on I think it's on November 15th is another date that we have built in there, right? So this is just preliminary. I think what's the compelling thing that you got to, for the board is, and the chief put it up there, is like 95% of this budget is compensation, right? That is baked in right now in terms of those resources are actively working, in the police department to deliver operations. What we thought we'd bring here tonight was here's the new enhancements that that we want to, you know, if the board endorses it, we will bring them back with more detail, with the costing, and certainly any other detail. So the commissioner asked for, you know, current FTE counts and some detail on, you know, active, inactive, and things like that. That can certainly, you know, all come back as well. On the capital budget, the last meeting, what we agreed to was that the study that was done in 2018 will come back to the board at some point for consideration. The big thing, as the chief mentioned, with regards to headquarters, is we need to find a site. You can't design a building or, you know, and we certainly wouldn't ask council to provide a funding envelope when there's no land, right? That just, it would take up funding capacity for other projects. That's why, if you look at the capital budget, that's why it's starting out there, right? I think there's a couple $1 million in the next couple of years. That is to get the design work and the land acquisition piece moving forward. So just wanted to try to clear up a couple of things there, but there will be more detail coming. But your comments are appreciated, and those are things that we can bring back. So I would encourage the rest of the commissioners to the same point, right? If there's anything you want to see in terms of analysis, there's basically like an open meeting right now on November 15th that we could come back to have some more deliberation on there as well. But just want to make sure that there's time built in for these things. Typically, right now we're planning the full tabling of the budget on November 28th or 29th. Sorry. Thank you. Chief, I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
Sorry, go ahead, Chief.
Yeah, so to the commissioner, so like your specific question around the digital communications piece, that's actually a project. That actually speaks to an actual capital project that was designed to build a certain system. We're at to the point now the system is built. So if you would have went back previous years, you would have seen there was more money to put in to build this actual system. And then what will happen is you'll see money going forward in it because it requires an upgrade for a certain system to do a certain thing. It's a really specific project for a very specific thing. It's not communications as a concept. It's a very specific, basically project to deal with a very specific issue.
Thank you very, very much.
Just a quick
Just a
question.
quick one. Again, we look at things a little bit differently. We're working towards building a budget. So I would love to start from where we are and say, look, what you're going to be seeing from us in a few years or few months will be a 20% increase year over year. The 20% increase will be broken down into human capital increase of 10%, maintenance 3%, that. The human capital part of it will include growth, replacement of staff, which is basically what you have. But I want a direction that we can now break down and say the why, what, when. Then we start putting these figures together. Because until we can do that, we will see what we've seen in the past. That figures sometimes do not speak to the actions that we want to do. I just want to see the journey that creates that bulk figure. And the public will come and say, why 20% increase? I want to be able to say to anybody that stops us or support the police by saying, that 20% is this, it's moved from this for this reason, for that reason, not just a global strategy that we have, but broken down into need assessment, gap analysis, the why, and this based on percentages. But it will fall from, the whole operational budget will increase by 20% or 2% or 3%, or will reduce by 10%. Then we'll start looking at the why.
Thank you. Commissioner Critchley.
Thank you, Chair. And I appreciate that there's a lot of work that went into this. I spoke to Inspector Boyd at the last meeting. He was talking about within his patrol, the business case that went into the ask. I think I have the same concern as Commissioner Akindoju. And I mean, it's not a concern in a negative sense. This is a preliminary thing, as you said, but I have been on this is my third budget. Every year that we've had the budget deliberations, we get feedback from the public that they have trouble understanding the budget. They don't understand the rationale behind the budget. They don't understand the evidence in support of the requests. And so I really feel I'm certainly not an accountant. I'm a lawyer. The reason I became a lawyer was because I'm bad at math. So I certainly wouldn't be a very good accountant. But the board has an obligation under 53(2) of the Police Act to ensure that the budget as a whole is in keeping with the board's duties under 55(3) of the Police Act, which is that we ensure that the delivery of policing services is in keeping with community values. And that has to be the entirety of the budget, right? So the concern that I have is sort of twofold. So year over year, we have discussions over service enhancements. And that's great. I appreciate having these discussions about service enhancements. I think to Commissioner Akintoju's point, we need to have a greater understanding of what was the evidence, what were the deliberations that went into that proposal. So if you're saying, we need 12 patrol constables, I need to understand what is the increase in calls for service, for example, or, and you have this information and I don't, right? So you mentioned anecdotally 4 to 5 call outs a day. I'd like that information to be presented in a readily comprehensible way so that I and other members of the public who we act as a conduit for understand that. Like, I'd like to know what the impact of the 12 patrol constables that were approved 2 years ago was, right? In terms of, have those people all been brought on? Like, is that making a dent in the other issues associated with understaffing? What is the progress associated with the understaffing report that was prepared by the Human Resources Department? And there's a series of recommendations in those. Are those playing a role, even in the early days of implementation of those recommendations in addressing these concerns? So I guess that would be my kind of global concern in respect of most of the service enhancements, especially as it relates to patrol. I mean, the feeling that I have is this is a significant request for increase. It's on my tally, it's 24 full-time equivalent positions. I mean, I could be wrong. Maybe perhaps when it's costed out, it's a little different, higher or lower, but that's a significant ask. That's, as far as I can tell, the most significant ask that's been requested in the last, 4 or 5 years, right? So I think really, both to Yemi's point and to my own, is that please, when you come back, both for our sake and for the sake of the public, right, who come to these things, please ensure that we have that information so that, and I know that you have the information. I know you're not just picking a number out of thin air. So when Inspector Boyd is saying, this is how many patrol officers that we need, please provide me with the evidence to provide the rationale for that. I'd say just one final concern I want to raise is as it relates to kind of mental health calls. This was discussed at last year's budget as well, right? The RCMP presented this same concern, right? Around, we have more mental health calls, we have more IPTA wait times. This board has never written to the Minister of Justice and said, please change IPTA. There's people on that side of the table, right? I know Chief Superintendent Christie, for example, is involved in various tables at the ministerial level and provincial level and looking at mental health and policing, right? He emailed me the other day about perhaps could you have non-sworn officers doing the IPTA stuff. Again, my concern is that if the concern is as it relates to increasing numbers of mental health calls, there's the budget for the mobile mental health crisis team has stayed the same year over year for quite a long time, at least in terms of the HRP contribution. I can't speak to what the capital health contribution is. So if that's the concern, then I would prefer that the request be for more officers for that unit, because again, like you said, these officers, patrol officers, are going to have the same training. Ideally, they're going to have the CIT training. They're going to have the same training as mobile mental health crisis team. But if that's where the need is, then obviously those officers who are doing that work day in and day out on a full-time basis are going to be the subject matter experts, and they're probably best aligned because they're not doing other patrol things, to work with Bill Moore's Public Safety Office as we roll out these civilian alternatives. So I guess that's going to be the final point I'm going to leave it at, is that if the concern is truly as it relates to mental health, I don't necessarily understand the request for just more generalized patrol officers when year over year we see the same budget for the mobile mental health crisis team. And we've already heard concerns about the kind of jurisdiction of that team, you know, the area in which they can actually go in person and visit people. And, you know, in just last meeting, we talked about there's been about a 15% reduction in the number of calls is going up year over year, but the number of in-person visits is going down. And so that was, you know, a concern that was identified at our last meeting. So I'll just leave it at that.
So to
Thank you.
to the chair,
ahead, Chief.
Commissioner. So firstly, in terms of, as I said at the beginning, my understanding, and at this point in the budget process, this wasn't intention to come in at a high level. This was not intention to come in with detailed budgetary analysis piece, which will come at some point in the future. To the second piece around the mobile mental health piece, adding more offers to the mobile mental health without Capital Health providing more clinicians is not helpful. Capital Health plays a very important role in that process in terms of how that actually works. This provides, like I said, twofold. One is that it augments and supplements the patrol piece in terms of, because we can bring back the piece that talks about how many colleagues that we have from an operational perspective in terms of, have all that, 100%. But the other piece is in terms of, it's not just the, and I hope I made this point clear, it's not just about attending calls and dealing with, but it's about dealing with people it's the hospital time that eats up our time. They've actually made adjustments to the IPTA Act that have had no benefit to me whatsoever. I think you know that. Like in terms of, you know, so the additions that have been, I would welcome the board contacting the Department of Health or Department of Justice, whoever actually holds this, to make some changes in that, and would love it. But at the end of the day, they have looked at this and what we thought were going to be some of the changes that were going to be a benefit to us haven't materialized. So in this particular case, like I said, this is about supplementing the patrol response capabilities, but at the same time, providing a collaborative way of dealing with Capital Health in the hospital in terms of, because we have a very close relationship. Sometimes it could be better in terms of dealing with some of these issues in terms of, and this is one of the ways in terms of, it has a lot of moving parts. Like I say, there's structural pieces, and it's a way of actually mitigating to the point that I can actually control, not the Minister of Justice or the Minister of Health or anyone else, but things I actually can control that will help mitigate and put more of my officers back on the street dealing with actual issues.
Thank you. Are there any other commissioners who'd like to speak? You want a second time? Emmy, I'd like to have an opportunity as well, so you go ahead.
I'm going to be very brief. Chief, what I'm asking for is not the detail. The detail is the facts and figures. What I'm asking for is actual direction. We go through budgetary periods because there's a change. If there's no change, there's no budget. There's no need to have a budget session. If we are spending the same amount that we spent last year, zero change. The only reason would be why. What I'm saying is, one pager would say the next budget is going to focus on 1, 2, 3. There will be major changes around this area. I'm a new chief. My vision is different. I'm going to have 10% increase in this, that, and this is the why. I'm going to focus on this. It's going to lead to a 5% increase. That at the end of the day, we're looking at a total budget increase of X, Y, Z, followed by some of the reasons you stated here. Well, that gives me a direction on what to focus on when the figures come. And I'll now drill on those. So those are the kind of things that I think at this stage will be our journey towards the budget. And like Harry said, we're part of this. That's where this session is to advise on how do we start picturing where the budget will be? With this literature, I call it literature because I don't see the figures or where it's going to go or strategy point. It just doesn't give me a clue of where the budget will be. And what stage are we? Are we at the beginning? Are we at the middle? I don't know. So just for us to be able to have a better clue, what's the direction of the budget?
Jerry?
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. So, again, what has been put in front of the board tonight is a framework, okay? So we'll go back again and say 95% of the police budget is compensation, okay? So we all know the new collective agreement increases will come in. So based on last year's compensation numbers, you're looking at 2.5% increase. That's contractual, okay? That's why we're not here to say, salaries are going to increase by that amount. That's a contractual piece, and that'll be, coming back in. Again, what the approach we've taken right now, right, and that what the conversations we've had with the board is, we want to build in enough time that this board can have appropriate amount of time with the budget. So I've heard a lot of things that are missing, but I haven't heard a motion put to the chief to say, this is something that I'd like to see come back in the budget, right? So I think that's some things that we can use this time for is if there's things that you want to see come back to the chief, like, we can, put a motion to us and then
Yeah,
we
not
can,
yet.
we
I
can
wanna
take
speak
those
first.
things away and bring them back. But, what the chief is saying is like, we're here with an ask, right, on a need to run the police force that then will come back with the details and all the costing, in terms of in terms of an overall package. So what I would say, and with all due respect to the board here, is that if there's things you want to see, how we build a budget at council is throughout the year. There's motions upon motions upon motions for staff reports and different things that we cost and that we bring back. That's how the incremental things and the service enhancements get built into the overall HRM budget, right? So that's what I would suggest. If there's things like that we want to see, then, put motions and, we can come back with additional information on things that you want to see with detailed costing.
Thank you. Nobody else needed to speak here. Okay, so I'm going to share some thoughts. I think we're saying a lot of the same thing. We're just saying them a little bit differently. And one of the things that the chief has done today is really expanded on what he did last meeting, which was his overarching themes. And this is the detail of why. This is the detail of what the next page is. And I think that Commissioner Akindoju is expressing, and you're hearing it, and now you can go back and come and build us a vision of what, and an understanding of what the net impact is on that 95%, for instance. Although it's contractual, it's still a reality of that budget. And these 18 positions total, is it 18? No, there's more than that. 24, I think, is that what it is? Yeah. 24 positions will impact that 95% because those are salaries. So we want to see that. We want to see that what it was last year and the percentage of growth at this. And then, and I understand what Commissioner Critchley is saying as well. We would like it in a piece of a presentation to us that is understandable to the public, but also to us. So we have an accountability measure that we need to be able to defend when we go to a recommendation that goes forward. And what we haven't seen is that kind of how does it fit into your larger picture? And that's what I think, that's the extent of what that is. Today, even though there was no particular although Commissioner Blackburn certainly went around the body worn cameras piece and why we might reconsider that, I'm going to start the ball off with actually going through your items, because I think that's a really important piece for us to talk about today, in particular in relation to our strategic priorities. And I want to remind the board that we have developed our strategic priorities, and it's our job now to see if these kinds of asks, because it's not our job to tell the chief where he's going to spend his money. That is his job. It is our job to see, does that align with our priorities and his priorities? We've seen in his themes that those two actually fit together well. So then he comes in with this information, and we need to look at it and say, does this actually fit what he said last time, which is the themes, where it's going? Does it fit in our strategic priorities? I'm going to bring it up because I think it's important. And I'm sorry that we don't have this today. I'm trying to get a plan on a page for you to be able to reference during all of these debates. Is it fitting within the roles, in the things that we see? So for instance, we have a strategic priority of develop, which is, and in particular, it's called increase accountability. Ensure the necessary structures are in place to determine the priorities, objectives, and goals of the police. Well, the chief is telling us what those priorities are. The hate crime, the mental health calls for service, the support for the patrol division, the community response officer reach, community safety office linkage. Those positions are what he's saying is important for him to achieve the goals and themes that he spoke to last meeting. It fits our accountability piece. So tick, that one works. Individually, we have the ability right now to say, I'm comfortable with this amount, and now go back and tell us what the actual impact is on your full budget. Tell us what it's going to cost. Project what those contractual increases are going to be, and then we're going to add this to it. And that gives us what I think Commissioner Akindojo is looking for. Sorry, I've got a fly running around here. The piece around our strategic pillar around evolve, oversee the development of people-focused policing strategy, ensure our police develop a clear plan that will enable them to attract, retain, and develop the people in their services. So we have heard throughout this last year about the impact of our human resources and the role of being a police officer, the impact of the kinds of the nature of the kinds of service calls that they're doing, our mental health calls, our unhoused situations, all of that. It's taking its toll on in a growing city on our members. That people focus piece rings clearly in the need for the EFAP position, for instance. The civilian officers, the constable positions, the mental health calls, the community response offices, those are, and I'm going to ask Bill Moore if you can speak to some of what do you see in this ask that actually is also reflecting the priorities that the municipality has through the public safety office, and what Commissioner Critchley has said about civilian-led and partnership-led initiatives that we have seen come forward in recommendations in the defund report, in the Wortley report, in the mass casualty report, all those things. We know it's in the public safety strategy. So how are they fitting into this? Those are the kinds of things, because we have it here, engage, consult, identify, and develop relationships with stakeholders to encourage collaboration, information sharing, and moving the strategy forward. Those are the things that we as a board need to go look back and say, are we achieving that in this space? The chief then, again, he has the right to come in and ask for these specific things. I don't feel like it's our job to micromanage those pieces. Our job is to say, yes, that meets our strategic priorities, it meets yours, it meets the ones that we are hearing from our community, which we have through our defund report and all those reports. We heard it last year. People want other models of delivery. That's our job, is to identify if these are the things that are being asked for in a budget. I think it's important that you hear from us today that we'd like that in another upscaled version, what you come back with. So when we go to council, when we make a recommendation to council and the public hears and sees it, that we can justify it, we can defend it, we can say, yeah, these are the reasons that we put this forward, and it's sound. It's based on what you've told us, it's what the reports have told us, it's what the police chief has told us are his priorities, and et cetera, public safety strategy. That's all, that's our job, I see it. So with that, I did have a few other things. The body worn cameras, I'd also like to suggest is definitely something I'd like to see us move forward with and have some form of a recommendation today to put that into your priorities, especially in particular to bring back that coordinator position. Obviously, since 2020, there was information around the cost of body worn cameras for all of our members and how that would roll out and those things. That should be updated, but I believe that coordinator would be that person that would flush that out for us. The capital piece, I would like to see us send a strong message to council to shift that 500,000 from 25-26 to 24-25 and put a very concerted effort and energy into identifying land. It's easy to say it's not there, but it's time to say it's there. It's time to find it, get it in place, show our members that it matters, show the public that it matters and why. And that's the stuff that we need the chief to come back and give us that rationale. Why is it important to the members? Why is it important to the public? And why is is it time to dust off that plan for headquarters? I can sit here and we can sit here and those members that have gone to the headquarters on Gottingen Street. And one of my questions is, how are you going to deal with the Band-Aids that's going to be required in between now and when that happens? Because I don't see it here either. There's things, although I see a few in the capital pieces, the fleet, police fleet replacement. So what is replacement going to achieve? I think that's some of what Commissioner Akindoju is asking. And we don't have the same capacity to influence this capital budget because the capital budget goes to council. It's within the full municipal capital investments. But it's going to be important for us as a board to recommend to council, we think a priority needs to be put back on the headquarters. Think a priority needs to be put back on fleet maintenance and fleet replacement. We think it's important that you put a concerted effort on police service equipment replacement, for instance. So I'm saying the things that I believe are important right now, but I hope that this commission would consider, but we need that detail to come in and we need you as a chief to bring that to us. Although we can make a recommendation, it's our mandate to make a recommendation for the budget, the operating budget. There's nothing stopping us from making a recommendation to council on their capital budget. It's a matter of us saying our opinion. And our opinion matters in capital investment because it allows you to achieve the goals that you need to in service delivery and public safety. So I'll leave it there. I do want Bill Moore to respond in just to say, give us your sense of where does this fit in align with the public safety strategy, these pieces, to help us identify the rationale for why this is a good step in a budget consideration. Okay, before we go to you, Bill, Commissioner Akindoju.
Thank you very much, through you, Chair. I want to refer back to Jerry here, and I want to be sure that we have a clear communication. You've raised good points, Jerry. If what we're saying is not clear, I can make it a little bit clearer. You've asked very good questions. You're asking us to provide some advice. What we've received today are clear priorities. I have nothing to do with that. Very good. Fantastic. The chief has clearly stated to us what are the priorities in that budget. But what I'm asking specifically, and probably some of us are asking, is what's the dollar impact of those priorities? How many of this is organic? We've talked about inflation in the last 1.5 years. How is that inflation going to affect those priorities? What percentage are we looking at? Not only that, we talked about, you alluded to the fact that 95% of budget is human capital. This is a new chief. A huge part of problems that we face is we want more, we don't know. How are we going to break down that human capital? What are we looking at? That 95% of human capital, what percentage of it will be salary increase, will be staff replacement? A lot of people are in staff, but not active because of certain illness and all. What's the replacement strategy on that? All this could come in a one pager for the operational budget. On the capital budget, one ask is, can you please move forward the headquarters building to now? If that is clear, if this capital budget that I see is talking about 2027, 2028, it's not part of our budget. So if you want us to ask for specifics, can we move that? You could say no. The HRM can say no, but we are asking, if my colleagues agree, that now is the time that we want to start to see an impact on that building now. And it's the budget that I see in capital budget does not talk about it. It's the 500 in the next 2 years, 1.5 million. So those are the few things that, see, at this stage, we're dialoguing. And I hope that we can agree and say, okay, yes, we're part of this. Thank you.
We'll go to Jerry and then we will come back to you, Bill.
Thank you. So I'm just going to go back to the building piece, right? So I think if I got this wrong, but I think what the CAO committed at the last time is that there was a study done in 2018, right? So a lot has changed since then in terms of population growth. Again, the big thing about a building is to have the land, right? And right now, that's not on the table. So what I would suggest is, and I think is that John McPherson, who's the executive director of Property, Fleet, and Environment, is going to come back at some point to this group and provide a thorough presentation of the 2018 study. One that's going to educate the board on the work that was done. And again, I'm not somebody who delivers capital. I fund capital. But one of the things that, a criteria to get capital funding is to say, do you have the land? And we don't have the land right now. So, it would kind of be, I don't know if it's late in the day, irresponsible to provide funding to a project where we don't have land, right? But like what I'm trying to say is that's going to all come back. And I think this board will have a really good debate once, you see all the information about that study and the new, information and metrics around that. So,
and that's the dialogue that we're asking about.
Yeah.
So if there's no real plan for capital can we look for a major cost in renovating that building? It could be an alternative. So if you want us to be part of dialogue, this is what we're doing.
Yeah.
So if you're not going to build a new one, can you allocate funds for a major renovation? Are you going to say no to that? Then we know. So those are the things that a dialogue, a communication is two-way. And once we agree, this is what we are looking for. And if it can be possible, So
yeah. And certainly I'm not the person that says yes or no.
I'd like to add to that. Actually, I don't think we need to put you on the spot to do that. I think that Jerry's not saying that we aren't, that its council isn't supporting it. It's that we need to dust that report off, bring it back, and us have a chance to have that conversation. So, and the land piece, land costs money. Land has to be a budgeted item. And I, as the chair on behalf of this board, I'm putting you on notice that it's time to dust that off and move it forward. If it means after that presentation with Mr. McPherson that a change in that, I almost put it down because I'm going to put a motion on the floor in a moment to move this something forward here, but it was going to include something in a change in the budget allocation and or a recommendation to the budget committee to revisit it from the board, because that's really the process by which we would do that, right? Is because we don't have that same ability to debate the full budget on capital. Council does that through the budget committee, but this committee needs that first presentation to see if there's sustenance in it that is enough to support it on its own. And, but I would argue that the land is 100% the first step. And if we keep putting it off and not putting something in the budget for it, it won't happen. It's just how it goes. So I'll leave it there. I'm going to take the liberty of putting
if-
this motion on the floor.
Madam
Okay,
Chair,
go ahead.
if I could just say one thing,
Go ahead.
just on the land, I think, you know, and not speaking for John, but I think, you know, staff are happy, not John Traves, but John McPherson, but I think staff are happy to take direction on headquarters. But again, I think I would ask the board respectfully, like, let the study come back with the updated metrics. And I think you will have probably a very, very good debate. I think there's no argument around headquarters.
So when could we expect that metrics? We've got November 15th available.
So that's not, yeah, I would say,
That's
I would-
clarification.
yeah, I would say, I think there's already a motion from Councillor Blackburn.
Okay.
From last meeting, for that report, right? So that will be coming.
Yeah, that's my,
Now, we're still waiting
Okay.
on Bill Moore to answer. and-
Yep,
and
yep.
And
I thought everyone got 2 chances. I just want some clarification on the process.
yes. Everyone does, and that was my second.
All right, and then there was
Question.
a big gap in the middle there.
Okay, thank you. Bill, can you offer response?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and to the members of the board. Certainly, there's an alignment piece with the policing budgets and the work of the community safety, especially in light of the public safety strategy. The points that that Chief McLean mentioned in relation to the work of the community response officers as it relates to interactions with those experiencing homelessness. We're working on, in addition, we have staffed up on the compliance side. So we now have 2 compliance officers that are basically dedicated to supporting the homeless issues in relation to ongoing review, and we're hoping in conversations with Dawn to have some of those CROs now, so that we form a group, and we've actually had some additional discussions with fire as well to look at a much more broad-based approach in our dealing with homelessness. And that leads into as well alternative responses. So the public safety strategy speaks to alternative response mechanisms in the area of mental health response. We're actually in the process now of staffing up the staff position to lead that work in the public safety office. So once that person is online, the time frame is to start looking at bringing them in and doing the planning on what that would work. So I would see working both with the RCMP and their CART team and Chief Superintendent Christie, and also with Don McLean and the group on what does that will look like. Because without a crystal ball or foregoing conclusions, I suspect that there's enough room for the mobile mental health crisis team, a civilian-led team, and the like. There's plenty of work to be done in that space, but I think the key will be doing that in concert. So I suspect as that becomes a deeper conversation across, I think there'll be a lot more presentations where the 3 of us are coming through to say, this is how we foresee, I guess, to go to Commissioner Akindojo's piece, this is the strategic approach that we would see occurring. And for us to go from where we are to there, these are the resources, these are the policy positions that we need to take, these are the issues that would have to be brought to bear ongoing. And obviously, if those issues, some of those would be totally 100% in the purview of the board, and we would welcome the board's discussion on how that happens. And then on the other side, where I work through under the CAO, I would have to work that. So I see those pieces coming together very, very closely. The Sobering Center, there's been very good conversations already to date, although it wasn't explicitly mentioned in the budget here. We've had those conversations on, now called the transition center as opposed to Sobering Center, how that will work and how we would operationalize that, because we will need the full support of police agencies to divert individuals from the prisoner care facility to the Sobering Center. So that work is already underway. Additional pieces that are coming down will be the drug and alcohol strategy. So that'll be starting again. That position, the individual will be taking the lead on that work is being hired now. So I would see that there would be a deeper discussion on the strategy. And in addition to that, some of the outreach work that would accompany that as an alternative response to dealing with some of those issues. And the last thing I would say, we've already had some conversations with the police in relation to the non-crisis violence intervention training. Non-violent crisis intervention training. So we have started to roll that training out across HRM as a service for frontline facing employees, whether they be in parks or wherever, so that, and we actually have brought on a trainer and moving that forward. And we've had some preliminary conversations with police as well. And so those are some of the connections I would see between the public safety strategy and community safety office writ large. I could go farther into emergency management and how those other things, but I'll leave it at that for this time. So I guess what I would say is that one of the reasons I'm here is for exactly that. How do we continue and deepen the conversations around response mechanisms for HRM that involve both police and through the board, but also the other parts of the organization.
Thank you. I think, go ahead, Commissioner Blackburn.
So just to get confirmation on something, because I think we're getting a little ahead of over our skis a bit here. I mean, the goal here today is to hear from Chief. This is what he would like to have for the next year to better do the job that needs to be done. It's our job to look at this ask to make sure that it fits with our strategic priorities, and then give him direction to go back and say, yeah, you know what? These 24 positions, this has merit based on all the information that you've been giving us over the past few months. I definitely think that there's a need for this. Go cost it out and come back to us. Am I completely off base on what this?
That's the motion on the floor.
Okay, thank you.
Nope, you're not off base, I don't think. And then we will debate the motion, of course, if we want to. So I would move to direct HRP to proceed with costing the items identified in the 2024-25 business plan and operating budget framework for consideration on HRP's operating budget submission. I'll move that. We need a seconder. So that's the ask. And then we've given a lot of feedback on how. So we need a seconder on that. Commissioner Akindoju, and then I will be also, with your indulgence, adding an amendment as well for that. So should we debate that now, or should I add the amendment after? It would be around the body-worn cameras.
I would suggest, given the questions that have been asked and everything else, it's probably worth just putting the amendment forward now and deciding if you want to add that into the mix, would be my suggestion.
So I would like to add as well, to include costing of the body-worn video coordinator position as well for the 24-25 budget. Seconder for amendment, Commissioner Thomas.
So the discussion first is
Thank
on
you.
the amendment, adding body-worn cameras into the budget.
Okay, so the first, the amendment now is what we will have a debate on, whether or not there is merit or not for the body-worn camera costing to be included in this year's budget. Does anyone have anything they'd like to offer there? Hearing none, should we call for the Harry?
Maybe just some clarification. I mean, my understanding was the position was funded and the issue was finding someone to fill the position. Is that, I just want clarification on that.
Can we have clarity on that?
Yeah, I think it was due to the fact that it was approved and was in the wage model. And then when the project, I'll say stalled for lack of a better term, it somehow, Craig could probably explain how it was removed from the wage model. So the position still exists in our position catalog, but we would have to go back to HRM for funding, to get the funding back into our wage model.
CFO?
Yes, that's correct. So the position exists. It just doesn't have, it's not funded, but with the indulgence of.
And
the
so
board,
this
we can-
would would do the trick.
Right,
So-
but
to have-
the question of clarification was they couldn't find anyone to fill the position. That's what I wanted to understand. Is that correct?
That's our understanding.
They didn't find a qualified candidate when they posted for the position.
Yeah, that's our understanding. I wasn't directly involved in the process, but my understanding was they didn't find a suitable candidate to fill that position.
Thank you. So the motion's on the floor, and I would suggest as the mover that that was 2 years ago. We have a new chief, we have a new perspective where COVID has relatively passed. People are looking at their lives a little closer, and there are need for jobs. So I see this as it's time to put it back on the table.
Doesn't tie your hands to funding it at the end of the day, but it gives you enough.
Right. Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I guess I'm going to ask for a little bit of clarity too, so that we bring back what it is that you're looking for. Because at listening, I'm hearing sort of two different things. I'm hearing that from Commissioner Akindojo that, a status quo budget, if we have no enhancements, will still be more than it was last year. And you're looking for what does that amount look like and why does it look that way? Inflationary increases, budgetary increases, sort of full stop there. And then there's the enhancements we'd like to add on that. And you're looking for the cost of that and the justifications and the reasons why we believe this is important. So, and maybe I'm oversimplifying, but that's what I'm hearing. You're sort of looking for two different things. Is that correct?
I think it speaks to the same thing as well. It's a deeper look at the larger picture. And there's the amendment piece. So the first part, the motion is saying yes to the chief, go back, give us that detail based on what we're looking for. And the second, the amendment is add in the body worn cameras coordinator.
To that piece, I think the amendment is not the costing of body worn cameras, because that's probably a much different number than a coordinated position.
Yeah, no, it's the coordinator position for the body worn cameras.
It's costing, Chris, it's costing of the body worn position, what's it?
Body worn coordinator,
Coordinator.
body worn videos coordinator.
Coordinator position. So, on the amendment.
Just 1 second, she's gonna put. Does anyone want to call for the question?
Just, Madam Chair,
Yes.
just with respect to the motion, I don't know if it needs to be in there, but staff's, we would come back on November 15th, use that date to bring back this information.
For clarity, that was our CFO saying that they would be prepared to bring all of this, have it ready to bring back for November 15th meeting. We don't have to have that in the motion, but that's good information for us to have here and to be planning for that. Okay, so I'll call for the question on the amendment. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, nay. The motion is carried. And on the main motion, any further debate?
Yeah, I'd like to make an amendment. So I it should go, wait, sorry, it's the motion. I wonder if we can put back up on the screen.
Trying to edit the as amended.
Just leave it for now.
Okay.
So it would be not just the costing of the items, but the rationale and the evidence in support of those items. That's what I would need to see.
That's a friendly amendment, I think, is it? No? I think it is.
Yeah, certainly, although, I think the chief has provided the rationale and the reasoning for this now in this presentation. So I'm not clear what additional rationale you're looking for. That was the point of this presentation in terms of those additional bodies, right?
Sorry, I said rationale and evidence. I want to know, for instance, just to give one example, right? The chief talked about moving people away from, seconding one patrol officer to work with training, right? So I'd like to know how many hours were they seconded for, right? How many patrol hours were lost as a result of that secondment? And so how many patrol hours would be recouped if there was a new position filled? That's the sort of evidence that I'm hoping could be presented. So yeah, rationale and evidence.
So a friendly amendment to that? Okay, I'm in agreement. Okay, do we have that in there now, Krista? Commissioner Akindoju?
What's the difference between rationale and evidence? We can go to dictionary to say that. I think rationale, period. I don't see why we should add and evidence. What's the difference? Rationale is rational. Rationale is why.
Yeah, I think it's supporting data.
Supporting data is more.
What I heard you say.
The reason I provided the clarification was John said, oh, well, they've already provided the rationale. And I said, no, I'd like the supporting data. But so, yeah, it's a more expansive rationale.
Consideration and operating budget. Didn't we already pass this, though?
No, that's the main motion.
That's the main
We're on the
one.
main motion. We
I
passed
gotcha.
the
Yeah.
amendment.
So. Okay. Okay. All right. No further debate. I'll call the question. All in favor, say aye. Those opposed, nay. The motion is carried. Okay, thank you all very much. Good debate, good conversation. Love it. Let's see what else we have. Where's my agenda? Okay, do we have any committee member updates? Any updates? No? No added items? Items for future consideration. We have nothing for in camera. Any notices of motion? Commissioner Critchley.
I'll provide two notices of motion. One is to, there'll be a motion requesting that the chair of the Board of Police Commissioners write to the Minister of Justice and or the Minister of Health requesting that a study be done on possible changes to Involuntary Psychiatric Treatment Act to relieve pressures on officers. So that'd be number one. And the second one would be I'll just leave it at that. I'll think of the second one.
Any further notices of motion? Hearing none, thank you. Then, so the date of the next meeting is October 25th. I would note that the board's October 25th meeting will be held virtually and includes public consultation on Halifax Regional Police 24-25 operating budget framework. For details on how to register to speak, please visit the Board of Police Commissioners website at halifax.ca. We just need a call for adjournment. So moved. We are adjourned. Oh, before we adjourn, I'm going to retract that. Chief Christie would like a moment.
Chair, if I may offer for the board and to Commissioner Critchley's comments, I understand the desire to write a letter. There may be worthwhile contemplating to ask someone from the Department of Justice to come to speak to the working group conversations that are happening. If the, you know, I think the spirit and the intent of the letter respectfully would be to get to some type of dialogue. So you may want to reconsider that the letter might be not just to express the concern or the issue, but actually invite somebody similar to the Wortley Working Group expert came and presented to the board. So that might enable you to get into some of the dialogue, which I believe the board would wish to have, respectfully.
Great idea. Thank
Okay,
you.
we appreciate that insight, and that would be part of the debate and consideration that we would have when that motion actually comes to
That would be
the floor.
something that might be well led by Bill Moore.
Bill, we'd like you at that meeting for that.
All right.
Thank you, everyone.